there was literally one day, like a week after he had passed, that I was walking to the pantry to go get something to eat, and just like, it hit me out of nowhere. I'm down on the floor, like weeping.
This is my first interview since talking to Kendrick Bourne. Radio Row. So you do have some big shoes to fill, because he was amazing. Like one of the greatest interviews that I could have asked for.
There were a couple of players that I interviewed on Radio Row that I was like, you are amazing. Like and you would never expect it. Two were Brevin Jordan. Brevin Jordan was actually like my favorite interview the entire time that I was at Radio Row. He was so good on camera. And then Alexander Madison.
Oh, nice.
Alexander Madison was like the nicest human being that I think I have ever encountered. And that was on the heels of like him just getting absolutely verbally abused that entire year.
Destroyed by everybody, and how inefficient he was, and how
but he was amazing.
That was the thing for me. I said this on the show. It's like, it's really easy to, lose sight of them as humans. And I'm not just saying that to say that and like, to like be this like really good guy. And it's like, no, like during the fantasy season, you're looking at data points for these players, right? Like they're almost not human from that perspective. And it's sickening and gross, and you feel gross, but it is a nice thing to kind of have that interaction. And we interviewed Tedero McMillan as well. And one of the things that we brought up to him was like, if he was hearing from fantasy people, from like players and stuff like that. He said that he didn't hear that much this past year, which was good. You want rookies to enter the league and not immediately just like reject everything that fantasy football is all about. But like, get that kind of garbage out of here. Like, these guys are dudes, and they're a lot of them are really, really gracious. Like we talked to Josh Johnson, was our third one, or our other one. And the dude was just like filled with unbelievable knowledge, because he's been in the league for like 17 years, and like that kind of, and just like he sat down with us for like 10 minutes beforehand and just chatted. And we talked about like his workout routine and stuff. And like, that's the kind of stuff that you just don't get to, see without experiencing it.
Yeah. And it's different too, when like the players are not going to interact with you if you are interacting that way with them previously, right? Like, so you're actually, all you're doing is shouting into the void and shooting yourself in the foot for eventual potential opportunities to actually connect with these players who are human beings and are just like, the majority of them are just great human beings. Yeah.
The one thing though I will say is that every single player that I saw was 1.5 times larger than I thought they were going to be. Dude. Right. Like walking by Derrick Henry was one of the most frightening experiences in my life. And I can't even imagine a defender trying to stop that man.
Well, I even held open the door at Radio Row for Jordan Love at one point. And I was like,
yeah, you're so much larger. Yeah. Well, I got that picture with Flacco, right? And like, Flacco is he's gigantic. Like, I'm 6'1", guys. If you see that picture online, I'm 6'1". Okay. I'm not like I'm 6'1", like 200, 195, 200. And Joe Flacco is towering over me. The dude is massive.
Which is then insane when you think of like guys like Darnell Washington and Derrick Henry, who make like these other NFL players look small.
Yeah.
Okay, you could literally flick me and I would probably go flying back 10 feet.
Yeah. Although I did see a post-game Seahawks interview with Sam Darnold and Kenneth Walker, and the interviewer asked them, it was like a quick, one of just like, it's like a TikTok video or something. They were just asking like quick questions. And one of them was, could a regular average human complete a pass in the NFL? And they both said no. And then they said, can a regular person on 10 tries gain a yard? And they both said yes, surprisingly.
Okay.
Yeah. They both
I think there's a difference between the Seattle Seahawks offensive line at this point and like the Las Vegas Raiders offensive line.
No one can,
it's not all situations are equal.
Yeah, it's very true. All right, we're going to get into that analysis. First off, it's great to talk to you. We haven't done a show together in a minute. You've kind of been all over the place with where you started in the fantasy space and what you're doing now and so on. Although I do have to say, I did get that W in your dynasty league this year. So I have to at least throw that out there.
And that's some pretty steep competition. So I think it's a little bit different too. If you wanted to put a flag up in the background and just with the massive W, like, I wouldn't blame you, man.
Yeah. But no, like I said, it's been a minute, but I want to talk and introduce you to this audience, for those who don't know you, what you're all about, where you started in the industry, what you're doing now, and sort of that journey in general.
Yeah, dude, you got 30 to 40 minutes to just talk about the, the winding road that is my career in the fantasy industry. No, it's, I think there will be a lot of people that are listening that recognize my name or my voice from the Fantasy Pros football podcast back in the day. And then there will be several that, a large majority that don't recognize me. So the elephant in the room right away is that I did take the entire 2025 season off. And a reason for that is my daughter was born in September of 2024. And she was born with an incredibly rare chromosome disorder. She spent 106 of her first 116 days in the hospital in NICU and PICU. She has a trach, G-tube. So for my medically complex parents and dads that are listening out there, I see you, I get you, I am you. And so it was at a point too where I'd gone through quite a bit in the industry and was really burnt out. So add on the just unbelievable stress of literally not even knowing if my daughter was going to survive. Where it was like, I need some time and I need to be able to kind of take a step back and rediscover honestly like a love for the game. Like it had become so much intertwined with my job that I kind of got to the point where I forgot why I actually got into this in the first place. So to go back to how I got started, in 2019, I started writing for the Fantasy Footballers. I got brought on to their writing team. Kyle Borgognoni hired me there, and just an absolutely phenomenal organization and what they do. Andy, Mike, and Jason are just great top-notch human beings. So I ended up writing for them not very long, honestly. Like I handled their dynasty coverage going into that NFL draft. And that was like writing up Daniel Jones scouting reports. So this is going back a while now. And ended up writing for them for about like 6 to 8 months, I think, if I remember correctly. And then and throughout that time, like got to know several people in the industry, got to get connected with some people over at Fantasy Pros. And then they put out a post that they were hiring for a full-time fantasy analyst. And I remember going to my wife and saying like, I don't think I know I'm not going to get this job, but I want to apply. I want to make some connections, see if I can get to know some people in the industry in that way through interviews or whatever. Like can't hurt to apply. Fast forward and I've seen the list of names that I got hired over, and I still do not know why I got hired for that position. Especially going back and listening to my first podcast, I was like, I was absolutely horrific.
Oh, everyone's terrible in their first podcast.
Oh my word. And it's a muscle. You got to flex it. You got to grow it. But you think that you're good as a podcaster, and then you actually listen back to yourself the first couple times that you do, and you're like, I'm not good. So I got hired on full time in January of 2020, and then March of 2020, all sports are canceled. And I was like, what have I done? I've got a young kid at home. What have I done? And went through just a lot there at Fantasy Pros over the 2 years that I was with them. 2020 was rough for various reasons. And then 2021, going into that season, we had really found a groove. Mike Tagliere, you can see the hat, like he still just means so much to me. But he and I were getting just incredible chemistry on camera. Dan Harris was at that point too. The three of us were just an absolutely phenomenal trio of a podcasting chemistry and stuff like that. So we, going into the 2021 season, Tags unfortunately got into the hospital with COVID, got put on a ventilator, and then in September passed away. And so really that entire time was just that. I don't remember much of the 2021 season, if I'm being honest. Like there's a lot of just trying to grieve on the fly. And while you're still working 60 to 70 hour weeks, and in the space where, you would check in to do a podcast and you're supposed to be podcasting with Tags and he's not there. But I remember like in November, I was like, okay, as long as Dan's still here, I think I can still deal with the constant reminders and just like, checking in every day and not seeing Tags there. I was like, I can still, because Dan had become one of my great friends at that point. And then at the end of that season, he let me know that he had an opportunity to go back into a former profession that he couldn't say no to, and totally understood that. But at that point, it was like, I think I need to go. I think I need to step out and get some space, if that makes sense. And so had the plan to launch my own company. And then a week before I'm ready to launch my company, I get a Twitter alert from a guy named JJ Zachariason saying that he's launching his own company.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that. We've heard that.
And I was like, oh, you got to be freaking kidding me, man. Taking all my thunder. And now it looks like I'm just going to copy JJ. And so did that for a year. It was great. I learned an absolute ton about running your own company, and then ended up at Pro Football Network as their fantasy football content director. That was a blast. Had an amazing team of people reporting to me, and just absolutely loved that. But then we got into, while I was at Radio Row for the Super Bowl in Las Vegas, my wife FaceTimed me and told me that she had a positive pregnancy test, and that was with my daughter. So that just kind of led us into a period where I was like, I need to step away, need to go back into what I was working in before. And so, yeah, that's kind of where we're at right now, where it's just been this super long winding road. And now I'm kind of back into just creating dynasty content, which, like, there are some people that can do redraft content and they can do it all day long and it's great. I found that it sucked the soul out of me. Like the constant talking about waiver wire pickups every single week, and mentioning the same names several times throughout the year was just one that just kind of sucked the soul out of me. So kind of just back to doing it for the love of the game, and honestly enjoying it a ton, getting into some scouting stuff and having a blast with it.
Let's talk about the impact of tags and what and how that kind of shaped you as an analyst, you as a person too, of course. I was friends with him as well. You were tighter, obviously, because you were working with him and such. But it was hard on the industry as a whole, obviously, when he passed, because he had this way about him of the way that I always phrase it is that he was just so gracious to have a seat at the table. More than, and it's something that I try to remind myself of, being, having the ability to speak to thousands of people and such, and having the ability to meet people, go to radio, all that kind of stuff, right? Just being so grateful and thankful, and that I have those opportunities. Really, like, I think back to him frequently because of the way that he sort of approached all of this. I can't imagine the difficulty of, like you said, doing, he passes basically like week 2 or 3, around that time frame of the season. And then you have to not only do the show without him, but you have to put on a face of energy and excitement, because that's what we do in the fantasy space, right? Because this is an entertainment first kind of
we're creating a space for people to be able to get away from what they're doing.
Right. Did that have, first off, I of course want you to talk about tags, because when someone passes and someone that important passes, speaking about them allows them to live on forever. But also, what kind of impact did that have on you, just loving this and like loving this job and associating, your love for work and this thing, sort of like inherently with the toughest time, or at least one of the toughest times of your life?
Yeah. Up until that point, I actually have been pretty blessed to not encounter grief in that level of having someone that close to me pass away. And so that was one where I was on the fly, literally learning how to grieve it just in general, like how, and so the phrase of what people have said, like, grief hits you in waves, I absolutely found to be true. Where there was literally one day, like a week after he had passed, that I was walking to the pantry to go get something to eat, and just like, it hit me out of nowhere. I'm down on the floor, like weeping. Right. And that was like, our relationship with Tags and I, it became a big brother, little brother kind of dynamic, where we would send insults back and forth to one another. And the way that we were on camera was the way that we were off camera, and like through our, Slack and workspace and everything like that, and texting each other outside of work and all. So that was truly the first time that I had to kind of like navigate that. But as far as like what he ended up teaching me, and the impact, the lasting impact that he's had on me, man, it was clearly evident that you could see his work ethic. Like, if you followed and read, oh my word, dude, if you followed and read any of his stuff, you could tell this dude put in the absolute work.
The primer was psychotic.
True. I wrote the primer in his absence, and I was like, this is psychotic. I am at 16,000 words for the week of writing up every single fantasy relevant player. And I've squeezed about every single thing that I can out of this orange.
And shout out D-Bro, by the way, for continuing on that as well. It's no easy task.
And he would be at like 30,000 words, and the editors would be like, Mike, can you please stop? The editors are like, we need to go to bed.
Yeah.
As he's still the night before it's going to publish, he's still in there making edits. So, but that was like, I would get up, at 6:15 or whatever, and I'd be clocking into work and I'd be ready to go. And I'd message and like, all right, I found this cool stat. And Tags is like, I've been up for 2 hours already.
Yeah,
that was literally him. And so that I already had like a pretty solid work ethic to begin with. And I think that's what gained his respect right away for me, was that he knew that I could come alongside him and actually put in some pretty solid work too. But that example has carried over not just into the fantasy industry and my work in the industry, but also just into life. Like I'm kind of holding myself up to that standard of like, I'm following the example that Tag set for a work ethic.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Man, it's I know that folks, not everybody got to experience Tags because they got into fantasy later. They didn't discover him or whatever the case may be. But it genuinely, it still is a huge loss to the space. And I think that, and I know that you feel grateful that you were able to do the show with him for the couple years that you were there and such. And look, I will say that I am glad that you're back and you're doing the content again, and you're digging into the dynasty stuff. Like you said, like the redraft stuff is like very much a grind, and given your life circumstances right now and such, I think it's great that, you're able to do the dynasty stuff, which can be more free flowing and kind of just like on your own time,
Yep, exactly.
So let's talk about football. Let's talk a little fantasy here.
Let's do it.
All right. So when you look back on the 2025 season, let's start here, both in real and fantasy football, what's one of the biggest takeaways that you're taking from that season that maybe you didn't even think would be the case after, or before the season?
Yeah, I think there's a lot that we could kind of nitpick, right? And I mean, that's to be expected. It's a massive league with massive amount of players that we can all kind of focus in and take micro views of. Like, and I think there's something to dive into with like, okay, Brian Thomas Jr., like how did that fall apart as much as it did? Like, what can we analyze within that? And we'll have time to do that. But I think the biggest thing for me as I was thinking through this was like that I didn't think would be the case is young quarterbacks with new head coaches getting off to as hot of a start as they did. And specifically Caleb Williams and Drake May coming to mind. And I think the big factor in that is young quarterbacks, yes, new head coaches, but paired with proven offensive minds, right? Like Josh McDaniels for Drake May and Ben Johnson for Caleb Williams. And so as we look at some of these, I mean, there are points, JJ, I don't know if it's like this for you, where my head's spinning and trying to remember which offensive coordinator is with which NFL team now. Like, we have 18,
there's totally
18
different.
new offensive coordinators this next year, and how 9 head coaches. So I'm like, okay, wait, hold on. I'm still trying to gain my footing to be like, to analyze that and say, okay, what are the implications of all that? But I think there's something to take away with that, of these younger quarterbacks that, they didn't land in a great situation. And immediately my mind goes to Cam Ward for next year. Like Cam Ward's year in 2025 was not great. Like you can look at the advanced statistics, and it was actually a historically bad season from an EPA standpoint, like really bad in the conversation with Josh Rosen. But you go into a new head coach this next year with Robert Saleh and Brian Daboll. And we're like, okay, maybe there's something to be said there for this young quarterback who had the talent worthy of being the number 1 overall pick to actually take and advance that going into his second year with a proven offensive mind, right? Like Brian Daboll was at the top of the list with Mike McDaniel for, okay, if he lands in this situation, man, we're going to be excited about that for fantasy football. So that's one that I circle and look at him like, that's something to focus in on as we move into future years.
I think if you were to ask me 5 or 6 years ago, even maybe 7 or 8, how I view quarterback play after their rookie season, I would say that my general vibe was definitely more black and white and more binary than it is today. Where back then I'm like, bad rookie season, because like historically, I mean, you could say the same for running backs and wide receivers, especially wide receivers. I mean, wide receivers, you learn a lot about a wide receiver from like a fantasy and production standpoint based on what they do in year 1, right? But my mind, when you go through a lot of analysis and you do years of it and you experience a lot of different things, you're humbled a little bit. And you also, though, realize sort of the changes in the game that you're viewing as well. And I think that we see that a little bit in what's going on in today's game, where, you know, the offensive minds, like this season to me, there was no clearer season in recent memory where like coaching mattered as much as it did, you know? Yeah. And we even saw that with like the Super Bowl. I mean, the Seahawks were an unbelievably well-coached team, both on offense and defense. I mean, Clint Kubiak obviously now getting the coaching job in Vegas, and then Mike McDonald was a monster in the way that he coached that defense. And so I'm very much, and here's another thing. One of the consistent themes, which was really random but true, when I walked around Radio Row and talked to different analysts this year, like a week ago, was that people are relatively bullish on Cam Ward. This is not a, you know, like, because my thing is, I'm going into Radio Row and I'm the fantasy nerd when most people are just like real football analysts, and like I'm the one who's sort of like, you know, out of the circle, if you will. Whereas, you know, if we're in like the fantasy football expo, it's the complete opposite, because everyone's just into fantasy. And so I'm trying to gauge how they feel about players, and I'm, you know, talking about seeing how they kind of view the fantasy space, and understandably if they're tilted over the way that some fantasy analysts speak to them on Twitter and on social media and stuff like that. And one of the things that they said pretty consistently was always this Cam Ward thing, and how fantasy analysts are way too strict with the way that they're analyzing him because of what, like you said, the advanced metrics are saying. Because if you look historically, players don't really come back from those kinds of advanced metrics. But I think we've seen enough in recent memory of guys who look like objectively they would be in that like bottom 10th percentile, and then coming through and being at least reasonably good.
Yeah, and it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to be like, hey, Cam Ward is my sleeper quarterback for 2026. But it really speaks more to, I'm going to be more invested in potentially some of the other receiving weapons, assuming that they do upgrade, because that was part of the conversation with Cam Ward. It wasn't just that, like, okay, he walked into a really good situation and he played really poorly. It was we knew going into the year that this was going to be a rough situation for any quarterback. With the wide receivers that he had and the coaching. I mean, that thing blew up quick. So I think it's all part of, you have to have the context to it. You have to have the context to be able to say, okay, how did we get to those numbers? And is there a way for him to rebound? So it's not necessarily that I'm like, yeah, Cam Ward, for sure, top 12 quarterback next year, but it's more so I'm going to be interested in taking some late round dart throws on an Elic Ayomaner or, you know, one of these other guys that they bring in free agency.
You know, I do think, I know that you're doing more dynasty focused stuff now, but it wouldn't surprise me at all. Like, from a dynasty standpoint, I don't really have a strong take on Cam Ward. From a redraft standpoint, I guarantee you he's going to be a late round dart throw for me next year. You know, where you know, the quarterback is deep enough where we're going to have 15 quarterbacks that we feel great about, and he's not going to be part of that group. But you get Dable there, where you know they're going to run a lot of those like RPO type stuff, that RPO type stuff. You're going to get him, using his legs a lot more. Obviously, that's a cheat code in fantasy. And so if you do see that ascension in any way from a passing standpoint, then all of a sudden you're like, okay, yeah, he could be a at least, you know, fringe top 12 quarterback when he's being drafted probably as like a mid to lower QB2.
Right. And it speaks to this entire theme. And the takeaway is my late round dart throw quarterback last year was Drake May. Right. Because it was a very similar, like, okay, well, in the final rounds of my draft, I'm going to wait on quarterback. Joe Flacco has a pretty solid streaming matchup in week 1, or do I go with Drake May? I'll go with Drake May because of the rushing upside. And then, of course, he has as phenomenal of his year as he does, and I didn't drop him the entire year. So it kind of speaks to that takeaway. It could work out. Yeah.
Let's talk about last year's rookie running back class, because I went into it thinking, you know, from like a prospecting standpoint and what the Zap model was saying, that last year's rookie class looked really, really good. The interesting thing is that when we walk away from the season, a lot of people have differing opinions and views on how good that class was. So my question to you was, do you think that rookie class underperformed, overperformed, or kind of just performed at expectation?
I think the answer to this is yes to all of the above, right? Like, I think you can answer it that way, because you look at the top of the class and Ashton Genty, Marion Hampton, RJ Harvey, Travion Henderson, like, Ashton Genty was RB17 in points per game. Marion Hampton, RB16. Harvey, RB22. And this is in half PPR scoring format. Travion Henderson, RB25. And you like, okay, Quinshon Judkins, RB23 from a points per game standpoint. You're like, that's not really what we expected of them, especially with rookie running backs. We expect them to hit the ground running and perform potentially into that top 15 category. But then you look at how deep the class was, and you go further down the board, and you're like, Cam Scadabo, RB11 in points per game. Woody Marks, RB33. Kyle Monungai, RB38. And you can just keep going down the list. And I don't know if it was like this for you, where you think through the rookie running backs from this last year, like, okay, Genty, Hampton, Harvey, Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt at RB37 in points per game. And the list just keeps going.
Yeah.
Like it just truly just keeps going, where you're like, him. Devin Neal, Brashard Smith, Ollie Gordon, Bashal Tootin. It just keeps going for the amount of players that were in this rookie class. And it made me think of the timing of it was really, really needed and beneficial for fantasy because of that elite 2017 NFL draft.
Yeah.
And how deep that class was. Those guys are at the tail end of their career or are already out of the league. That was Christian McCaffrey, Austin Eckler, Dalvin Cook, Joe Mixon, Aaron Jones, Leonard Fournette, Alvin Kamara, James Conner, Marlon Mack, Kareem Hunt, Wayne Gallman, Chris Carson, Matt Breida, Corey Clement, right? That was an insanely deep fantasy draft. And I think the depth of this past class was really, really needed to bring in that next wave of players. So it's kind of a accordion effect, if that makes sense, where you're like, the top of the class didn't meet expectations really or overperform. But then the back end of the class and some of those dart throw names actually dramatically overperformed. And it kind of brings them all into this really kind of just in the middle. Yeah,
no, that makes a ton of sense. The other thing, like you mentioned that 2017 class, which was always the comparison, that folks were making. And I, in my opinion, when you look at it objectively, like starting the season, beginning of the season, before the season, I thought that there were players like this class matched up well with that one in terms of just like sheer talent and ability. And I did that even looking at it objectively through the models lens. But then on top of that, like there are players from that 2017 class. Like it felt like this was the year where it finally collapsed. You just named all the players, but Alvin Kamara finally looks like he fell off, right? Like it's probably over for him. You have Joe Mixon, who didn't even play. I'm assuming retirement is coming for him just based on what happened there. James Conner, gets banged up, and who knows what's going to happen, with his career in the future. So you get these injuries, and then on top of that, you already had guys who are already kind of done, like a Dalvin Cook type. CMC is still cooking, but even he had
how much longer?
Yeah, and he didn't even have that efficient of a season. He was a beast, but he didn't have that efficient of a season. And so it's sort of like a changing of the guard. Like we have this new running back class. I look at it and I would agree that the ceiling outcomes were not there. We didn't get, maybe we could have seen Cam Scadabo end up as a low end RB1, high end RB2, maybe. I know that my rest of season rankings had him around there right before he got hurt. But we can't just assume that would have gone down, the rest of season.
Yep.
Ashton Genty, inefficient in a bad situation. Quinshon Judkins, inefficient in a bad situation. And then took a little bit for Travion Henderson to get going, et cetera, et cetera. But again, you mentioned that depth. The day 3 guys, I don't think people realize how rare it is to have multiple, I'm talking like 3 or 4 day 3 running backs being as relevant as they were in a single season like that. Now,
everyone's going to go into this year being like, oh, I can get running back in my 3rd or 4th round of my dynasty rookie draft. No, you can't.
You can't. You usually get like one of those guys a year. And we had, from like a usable piece standpoint, Woody Marks wasn't like a beast, but he was at least usable in fantasy. And Kyle Monungai wasn't a beast, but he was usable in fantasy. And you had Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt at times, down the stretch whenever he had that backfield to himself. And then there's still players in this class, like a Bashal Tootin, who didn't get that opportunity, was banged up a little bit. I have some concerns that I actually need to send an amendment to a take that I had earlier last month. But regardless of all that, like he still might have an opportunity next year if they don't, re-sign and keep Travis Etienne. So there's just a lot of that going on where like some of these guys who didn't break out yet could still do something. And so that's to me why I would agree totally that there's a lot deeper of a class than what folks might totally just realize because they're looking at more of those like high-end outcomes overall.
Yeah, and it's again going back to the 2017 NFL draft, like those are chairs that are going to be opened up, right? Mm-hmm. If they aren't already opened up. And Eckler was that situation for Washington with Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt stepping in. So like these players that, especially given the fact that this 2026 NFL draft does not have as deep of a running back group, then there is a chance for Bashal Tootin to actually make an impact next year, assuming that ETN leaves in free agency, because it's like, well, you're not going to find a top tier replacement for him in the NFL draft this year. So might as well go with Tootin, who we saw some flashes from this past year.
Yeah, for the record, and I'll just tease this / I think I'm going to end up sending a newsletter blast out about it. But my Tootin take last month was that I thought he was a buy candidate, and I only called out like 9-ish buy candidates on the show. And the more that I've done, because I'm doing year 2 profiles for the prospect guide right now, the more I've dug into it, the more I think, okay, it's fine to buy him, but I shouldn't have called him out specifically on the show. I think I would lean more buy than sell, but a lean is not necessarily what I want to call out on a show like that. And there's some reasons for that I, dig into it and whatnot. But, I just think he's a volatile asset, or more volatile than I initially, thought whenever I made that take. But with that class, one of the weird things that I did a sell candidate show earlier this week. And on that show, I talked about a lot of year 2 players, specifically in this running back class, since we're talking about running backs, Travion Henderson and RJ Harvey. Now, I don't think they're bad players. This is all a price related thing. And I was getting those prices from Keep Trade Cut whenever I made those takes and those stances. Am I an idiot for calling them out as potential sell candidates right now?
The conversation with Dynasty always has to take into the greater context and understanding that it's all relative, right? Like, you can say a player is a sell, like Travion Henderson. You can say he's a sell, but if you're going to get the RB 35 in return, it's like, okay, well, no, he's not a sell right? You're trying to take advantage. And I did listen to that podcast. I think you mentioned James Cook as the name. That was like Henderson. Henderson being ranked above James Cook doesn't make sense to you. And that's the same way for me. I've got Henderson at RB8 in Dynasty right now, and then James Cook at RB6. So if there is an opportunity to sell someone like Travion Henderson for James Cook, then yes, I would do that, because the rankings actually dictate that and spell that out clearly for me. But if you're going to just say, like, there are some Dynasty sells where you're like, I want to get out now before the bottom completely falls out.
Yes.
And I don't think that's the case.
Would
with
agree there.
Either of these players, right? Henderson, the bottom's not going to fall out on him. And RJ Harvey, the bottom's not going to fall out on him either. I think he's going to have this role. But I think for Henderson, the comp that I keep coming back to from a usage standpoint and potentially the path is Jahmyr Gibbs, right? You remember the first 2 years for Gibbs, if I'm remembering correctly, the first 2 years for Gibbs were like, okay, he's in this split backfield. He's not truly taking that next step that we think he can be and can handle a larger workload, because that's the role that the offense had for him. And they wanted to keep him in a lighter touch count. And he's still being very, very effective for fantasy, but he's not going to truly ascend because there is another member of this backfield in David Montgomery. And so for Henderson, I think it's a very similar conversation with Ramondre Stevenson and how well he performed down the stretch last year. I think we're not going to get Henderson stepping into a larger role, even though he may well be deserving of it. There is an argument to be made with the 1-2 punch that they have in New England and this offense taking another step next year, where Stevenson's under contract. He's not going anywhere. I think Henderson, we're going to have to wait a year before we then see potentially a larger step forward. So that means that he's still a valuable top 10 dynasty running back because of his age and because of the talent level, but I don't think we can put him up into the top 5. For Harvey, really quickly, Harvey is there. We've seen that there are NFL offensive coordinators and NFL head coaches that they have their offensive scheme, and then they believe so firmly in that scheme that then they're going to go out and find the players that fill the roles to that make that scheme go. And so for Sean Payton with RJ Harvey, I think the role that he has is what we saw this past year, which was 146 rush attempts and 58 targets for RJ Harvey. And that didn't change much when J.K. Dobbins went down. You saw other running backs step in versus the majority of the workload going to Harvey. So I don't see, let me know if you think differently, but I don't see that role massively increasing this next year. I think in free agency, I think they could go out and get a Tyler Algier to fill if they don't want to bring Dobbins back because of the injury history, but I think they could very well bring Dobbins back. I just don't see Sean Payton going like, you know what, I'm going to change everything that I've done over the how long and be like, Harvey at 205 pounds or whatever he is worthy of being a workhorse 20 plus touch, a game type of player. That's just not the conversation, the path I see playing out.
Yeah, I mean, so first off, with the Henderson stuff, I also see with Henderson, because I think I have Henderson at like RB8 in Dynasty, even though he's like RB7. And that it's like, why would you call him out as a sell? Well, first off, I think it's a little provocative and interesting content to do it, right? So like I wanted to talk through that. That's not me doing clickbait stuff. That's me saying like, hey, I think that like this is the way our mind should be thinking about Dynasty, that even the players that we think are good, we can still trade away if we think that this is an opportunity to do so based on what the market is saying. It's also, there's just wide receivers that around there that I would just way rather prefer than Henderson in that instance. And so that's playing a big role. But like the running back rankings in general, like if you go and you sit down and do Dynasty rankings, running back just drops off like after like RB4. You're just like,
that's the point that I was just about to bring up. Yep.
I could throw many players into this spot. The RJ Harvey stuff, I think, is a little bit more clear cut in terms of where I see his overall talent profile, versus a Henderson, because I thought Henderson was a better prospect. Obviously, he got a little bit better draft capital. Yeah. The landing spot was doing a little bit more of the heavy lifting for RJ Harvey. And there's also, I personally think there's a phenomenon that goes on where like, and I'm guilty of it too. Maybe I'm even guilty of that to a degree with like a Bashal Tutin, where a player that you like going into a draft gets drafted by maybe higher than you expected, or to a team that looks good on paper, that they can get that immediate opportunity. And it's sort of natural human nature to want to double count that for that player. Right. And there was an RJ Harvey hive during the draft process last year where people really, really liked him. And I liked him too enough. Like I thought that he was a pretty good prospect, but the stuff that I look at analytically, like he was older, he's already 25 years old. He's that's like the Ray Davis stuff. Like Ray Davis was coming out old too. And like, he had a really robust profile. Well, yeah, he also did because he was playing for a while. RJ Harvey had injuries and he, was what have you, but I didn't think that his production profile overall was like so robust and can't miss. I didn't think he was a bad prospect. He had a really good burst, really good speed score. And we saw that, like we've seen that, in the NFL now, that he can generate some of those bigger plays. His 20 plus yard run rate was over 2% this past year, which is above average for, a rookie running back. But I just go back to, we love Sean Payton's offenses for the fact that they will target the running back through the air, which is why I think Harvey probably will have some role, as you're noting. Yes. But the fact that we didn't see enough from him on the ground as a runner makes me believe, like he was third worst in yards over expected per rush, rushing yards over expected per rush this past year, according to Next Gen Stats. The fact that we didn't see that makes me believe that I don't know if he's going to be like a 200 plus attempt rusher consistently. And if he doesn't, he can be like a 170 kind of guy with like a 12% target share, and he can be viable in fantasy. But there are people out there who likely see a legit like RB1 ceiling with RJ Harvey, and I'm just not there right now.
I would agree. And I think the conversation to potentially have him higher up in dynasty rankings would be if we didn't get the J.K. Dobbins injury. And that just kind of continued. And it was like, okay, well, we still don't know if Harvey gets the full workload, what could that be? But we do. We have that piece of the puzzle. And as fantasy analysts, we're constantly looking for how can we take the pieces of the puzzle to put them together? And we're going to get the picture wrong sometimes, but we want to try to get as many pieces of the puzzle as we can. And one of those with Harvey was the fact that we did have a clear path for him to step into the RB1 workload, the clear RB1 workload, and Sean Payton still chose not to do that.
Yeah. I think it's important to look at those splits. Don't overstate them, but they're there to help guide us. The year 2 model has 3 elite producers. So I have a new category this year called legendary performer. None of them are in that. There's not many that are historically, but the elite producers are guys who, you have a fairly good shot of giving us a wide receiver 1 season over the next 3 years. So that's Tedero McMillan, no surprise there. Emeka Ibuka, and Luther Burden is the other one. Now, part of the Luther Burden thing is anchoring to how much the model loved him as a prospect. Like his score, his ZAP score was just as good as T-Max and Ibuka's last year, which is wild because he was a 2nd round pick. But my question to you is, how are you ranking those 3 in Dynasty right now? And are there, of those 3, do any of them make you nervous?
Okay, so McMillan is wide receiver 10 in my Dynasty rankings right now. He's wide receiver 12 in Fantasy Pros' ECR, so the expert consensus ranking. So not a super big difference. He's in a tier. If you wanted to move him down, that's fine. Egbuka, wide receiver 11. in my rankings in Dynasty, wide receiver 16 in ECR. So that's one where I'm a little bit more bullish on Egbuka. And I think the missing piece to the puzzle there is that he did have a hamstring injury in week 6.
Yeah.
And then that was the point where we saw the drop off. So I'm kind of banking on that. Like, we can't see what we saw from the first 5 weeks of Egbuka, and especially have the missing component of, or the potential component of Mike Evans leaving in free agency or retiring, and then that being really his offense and Chris Godwin's, to then not be a little bit more bullish. But if you ask me which one makes me the most nervous, then that would be that ranking because of what we saw down the stretch. And then Burden, I've got it wide receiver 19 in my rankings, and he's wide receiver 26 in ECR, which just blows my mind. Like, I
have him top 22. Yeah.
I'm very bullish on Luther Burden moving forward, especially if we get the DJ Moore trade that's being rumored, which I think there's a very good chance that happens. So the main part for that specifically is this offense doesn't have really anyone who can stretch the field, like anyone who has the ability to threaten deep and open things up, which is why, like, if we get that, man, Colston Loveland could potentially take another step this next year and opening things up underneath to be able to take some of those safeties back and deeper in cover 2. So, like, Luther Burden was the field stretching option, but he was doing that out of the slot and because of his deep speed. But if we move on, if the Bears move on from DJ Moore and they bring in, I'm just throwing out a name that's a known field stretcher, but like Darius Slayton, like they bring in that type of architect where it's literally like, hey buddy, you're out there running cardio and you're not going to take a ton of targets from us, then we could see Luther Burden just absolutely go nuclear this next year, because all of the supporting statistics are there to signal that Luther Burden is just going to be elite.
Crazy yards per out run rate for him this past year. Crazy. A lot of people got a little angry at me on Twitter because I sent tweets out and I would update it. Of his yards per out run compared to other rookie yards per out run with a threshold of, minimum threshold of, 200 routes or what have you. Yeah. And I will say, like, there is something to the fact that, like, he didn't have a full-time role like a Puka Nacua did. But no one's looking at him the way that we looked at Puka Nacua after the rookie season. Like, it's to just say that he was incredibly efficient when he was on the field per route run. And if you do look at players that had, like 100 to 300 routes run, more in that range, and you look at the players who had, really high yards per route run rates, you have some misses in there for sure, but you have some hits also. Like there's, like Chris Godwin types are in there. He was over that 2 mark, or I think Randall Cobb. Like there's good players in there too. So it's not just like, oh, this is only a volume related thing. It's not that. I mean, Luther Burden balled out. And to me also, there's a lot of, for me, there's the concrete nature of what his ZAP score looked like for me, entering the league, that makes me feel more bullish too, because this isn't something that just came out of nowhere. Like, he was a really good prospect coming out. And I think that teams had maybe a little hard time projecting him because he had a weird role in college. Maybe they didn't like his character as much, whatever the case may be. But I think that he found the exact spot he needed to find, especially with the insane head coach that they have there and Ben Johnson. Right. So I think the connection there and the matching and the pairing makes a lot of sense. You mentioned Egbuka. I wrote up his year 2 profile, and I was looking for players in history who started as hot as he did, right? Because he had over 20 PPR points per game, like after the first 5 weeks of the season. And then from there, he had like 8.3 PPR points per game. Yeah. And I tried to find players who dropped off that significantly. There's none. You cannot. I was about to say I started laughing because I was like, there's none. You can't find one. The only player that like is kind of close. The problem is that he started just so hot, but he still stayed hot, was like Nacua. Nacua dropped by, I don't know the exact number is, but he dropped by a relatively decent amount from like week 5 to 7 through the rest of the year. But he was still over like 16 PPR points per game in the second half. Right. Calvin Ridley is another one. Maybe you could look at him and say he dropped off a little bit, but at the same time, we're talking about players that are good at the game and good in fantasy. So the drop off to me isn't necessarily, it's more just like just a weirdness. If it would have gone in reverse, we would be looking at an Amon-Ra St. Brown type production situation where everyone would be insanely bullish right now on Emeka Egbuka. He'd be top 5. Yeah, right. Rankings. Right. If it would have gone in the reverse. So I'm about at market with Egbuka. And then T-Mac, as you mentioned, I think that he's just like a safe bet at this point of being. T-Mac actually there was a really crazy thing that I looked at. I've been looking at first down share, so that the percentage of first downs that a receiver had in his offense. T-Max is at 32.4%. That's the fourth highest mark of all wide receivers in the year 2 model in the history. And that goes back to 2011. The other 3 that are ahead of him, Malik Neighbors, Odell Beckham, and Puka Nacua. So there's a lot of, like, when you remove the situation a little bit from Tetairoa McMillan, his numbers are amazing. I mean, his rookie season really was special. It was really good.
Yeah, it's the talent conversation for McMillan versus the situation.
Yeah,
right?
situation's not great.
Right.
Yeah. Let's talk about Matthew Golden. You nervous about Golden right now?
We have to.
Yeah, right.
I definitely am. I think it's all, again, it goes back to what we talked about with Henderson. It's like it's all relative. You're not going to find many dynasty analysts or fantasy analysts that are like, yeah, Matthew Golden's still a top 20 wide receiver in dynasty rankings. He's wide receiver 46 in my rankings and wide receiver 48 in ECR. So I'm actually higher than ECR on Matthew Golden, and I want no part of him.
Yeah.
I think the missing part is it's not necessarily only about like the talent level, but it's the offense, and it's just how many mouths there are to feed in here. And this has been the conversation for how long now, where you've got Tucker Kraft and Luke Musgrave, then you've got Romeo Doubs and Christian Watson, and it just keeps going. And then the players out of the backfield. It's like, how clear of a path is there for this player to truly ascend? Yeah. And that was kind of like why I didn't love Matthew Golden landing with Green Bay last year, even though the draft capital was there.
Yeah.
And the tape was good. It's like, okay, well, he's got to dominate the target share. And I just don't see that happening because, again, the offensive structure and the role the scheme says we need to find the players that fit these roles. And you've got Romeo Doubs, who fills a very, very valuable role in that offense. Can Golden step into that next year? Maybe, but that's not going to be a 20% plus target share.
Yeah, there's a couple things with Golden too, where like I try my best to not just look at the individual season or the 6 or 7 games for these players where something good or bad might have happened. I want to see what that looked like leading up to. That's why I have journey comparables where it looks at a player's ZAP score and then their year 2 score and finds players historically that shared a similar journey as them. So they look the same as prospects entering the league, and then they look the same exiting year 1, right? So it's a larger sample. It's like a story about this player. Yeah. And if a player is bad and bad again, then they're probably not that good, or if a player is good and then bad, and then you're like, well, you can at least tell the story a little bit. With Matthew Golden, like the model had some really real concerns with him, and his year 2 comparables right now, his journey comps, are Justin Hunter, KJ Hamler, and Adonai Mitchell at this point.
Oh, good night,
and so it's not looking great for Matthew Golden. And I also think in Dynasty, I think to myself when I'm about to make a move, is this guy going to burn me? Is this really going to... Yeah. Could I see Matthew Golden being a wide receiver 2 in fantasy over the next 3 years? Maybe. I think that a more likely ceiling outcome is like a wide receiver 3 type. But even if he is that wide receiver 2, you're probably not going to feel so burned in that instance, and so it's a lot easier to kind of move on.
Yeah, well, the tough part is like, who are you selling Matthew Golden
100%.
For? Like you need
to find the truther in your league,
right? And good luck. Like at this point, you're kind of just holding. Like you're really just riding the wave for spending a late first round pick on him or early second round pick last year, when you could have gone some different directions. You're at this point in Dynasty, and it's the same way with Travis Hunter, in my opinion. It's like you're just kind of riding the wave because otherwise you are just completely taking that pick and lighting it on fire by selling it away.
What about Colston Loveland versus Tyler Warren? I'm assuming based on what you said about Burden and Loveland, you're on the Loveland side here. But is it strongly on the Loveland side?
There's a very big gap in rankings, honestly. No, just kidding. It's Loveland at tight end 3 in Dynasty and Warren at tight end 4. So there's not a big gap here. I think again, in fantasy, and you know this, like we have a strong sense of recency bias. So whatever just most recently happened is going to affect the way that we view a player. So again, we talked about it with like, if Egbuka had gone the other way, then we would have him in wide receiver, like top 5 in Dynasty rankings. Now he's wide receiver 16. Loveland, very, very strong end of the year. We saw him on the national stage in the playoffs. Warren had a really solid start to the year, and then things kind of, flickered out from there. Yeah. So I don't want to overreact to that. These are both very, very solid Dynasty assets moving forward. It was a phenomenal class, and both should be in the top 5.
What about, like, do you think that there's a case to be made that Harold Fannin should be ranked ahead of Tyler Warren?
talent level, I think it's in the conversation.
Yeah.
But the situation's not.
Yeah.
Like, you tell me I can have Daniel Jones, which again sounds crazy to even be saying the sentence out loud, but like Daniel Jones as the quarterback attached to Tyler Warren, or Deshaun Watson or Shedeur Sanders. Like, yeah, I'll go with Daniel Jones in that situation. So
yeah.
Could that change in 2027 if they, massively upgrade the position? Sure. But I don't see that happening anytime soon.
Yeah. Hopefully Dimes is good, and that Achilles is not,
right. It's not like it's a super clean situation to come back from, but I would still go Daniel Jones over Deshaun Watson.
I've been toying with the idea, like there's some part of me that might end up having Fannin ahead of Warren from a dynasty perspective. Because I think, like, both players are interesting because they're both really versatile in the way that they're like their alignment and stuff, right? Like Colston Loveland is more of the traditional, can like just athletic freak who can do the Travis Kelce type things and have like higher ADOT looks, like his ADOT was like 4 yards higher than Tyler Warren's last year,
Yes.
So he can get down the field more, he can create those big plays, and that's going to be, he's going to be phenomenal in fantasy moving forward. The Tyler Warren and Harold Fannin stuff, there is more of that alignment of like, Fannin's lined up in the backfield frequently, and Tyler Warren, you'll see that too. And then you get those like lower ADOT looks, those cheaper looks. And we saw that with Harold Fannin down the stretch, where he had a 31% target share over the final 5 games of his season because he did get hurt. But yeah, like part of me is like trying to think through that situation and being like, what is the true delta here? And should I be buying into that delta so much when, again, Tyler Warren's an older prospect, like he is a couple years older than these guys. And so that's at least like going through my head right now as to why I'm considering.
I think it's fair, right? Like Colston Loveland, you need a quarterback like Caleb Williams to truly unlock him with the role that he occupies in the offense, versus it really doesn't matter who's throwing the ball to Harold Fannin or Tyler Warren because they're 2 yards away from the line of scrimmage or 3 yards behind the line of scrimmage. Like, if you're playing NFL quarterback, you should be able to get the ball into their hands and let them create after the catch, which they're both so good at.
Yeah, there is some stuff up in the air too, because we don't know exactly what Fannin's deployment's going to look like and such with Todd Monken there. I'm bullish because Monken's been pretty tight end friendly in the past, but yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on there. I have months to think about this. All right, 2 quick questions, because I haven't even talked prospects yet on this feed, in this feed and on this show. You've done a little bit of prospecting work. I finally have it all in the database and I'm starting to dig in. And I do know, the top guys and what the model's saying about the top guys. So I'm curious. So we have this like big 3 at wide receiver. You have Jordan Tyson, Mekhi Lemon, and Carnell Tate.
Yep.
How do you rank these guys and what do you see out of those 3 players?
So Carnell Tate, wide receiver out of Ohio State, 6'3", 195 pounds, like has the size to be a true prototypical X receiver at the next level, but also is not just like a contested catch kind of like, he can do it, but he has incredible speed, acceleration, movability, can make some just crazy catches outside of his frame. Just a very, very natural receiver. So his projection to the next level is actually pretty easy. And I think he's going to get very, very high draft capital. Jordan Tyson, 6'2", 200 pounds off the top of my head. At least what he's listed. We'll see what he comes in at the combine. But I think his role, he has alignment versatility. He can go anywhere on the field and play and make an impact. Again, a very natural receiver, can make some big plays. I would really love to see him utilized heavily out of the slot. With his ability for quick twitch at his size is actually pretty special. That stood out to me on tape. And I'm at the point right now in my prospect evaluation where I'm going through and doing film evaluation. And then I'll go into a stage of advanced statistics to be able to kind of look back and say, okay, did what I see on tape, did that get validated with those stats, or do I need to go back and take another look? And then injury history and NFL combine testing and all that. Mekhi Lemon, wide receiver out of USC, is just pure electricity. Man, this guy, his top end speed, he's going to run in the 4.3s at the combine. His ability to threaten deep is just insane. But he also has the ability to move into the slot and be a refined route runner out of the slot as well and create separation very, very easily. So he's someone where I worry a little bit about the deployment and what he could be. He's got to land with the right NFL offensive coordinator, because teams could look at his deep threat ability and say, we need that for our offense. and buddy, you're going to run go routes and post routes all game long, and that could very, very limit what he could do from a fantasy standpoint. But if he lands with the right offense, like how Mike McDaniel utilized Tyreek Hill, free releases, getting him in motion, pre-snap and letting him run, like that is the ideal deployment for Mekhi Lemon. So I would put Tate, then Tyson, then Lemon, but those are all guys that if you want to put them into one tier, and I think there's another name that belongs in that tier based on my film study right now, but if you want to put all those guys into one tier and shuffle them around, I don't have any issue with that.
Who's the fourth that you would throw in that tier?
Based on film study right now, KC Concepcion from Texas A&M.
Yep.
Guy's insane. His separation ability is, I've absolutely love. Like the Notre Dame game, I just watched his all 22 just the other day on Notre Dame, and that's teach tape, man. And it's so frustrating because his quarterback play, there are so many times in that game where you're like, he could have had 200 to 300 yards, and his quarterback, he's wide open routinely the entire game. Yeah. And his quarterback just could not make the throw to be able to put it on him or anywhere near him, in fact. So he's one that I'm watching pretty closely, and I'm going to be higher than consensus on him for sure.
Yeah. So all the big three, the model likes a lot. They're all in the elite well, two of them are in the elite producer category. This is a spoiler alert for people. The first time I'm even saying this out loud to anyone outside of David Kitchen and Brandon Gadula, who work for Late Round Fantasy Football, Jordan Tyson is right now, today, there's stuff that can change, listed as a legendary performer. His age-adjusted production profile is out of this world. Like it's
crazy because his stats from this past year are not truly elite.
It'll look at, so I think it's the year after his sophomore year where he was banged up and didn't like play and didn't accumulate anything. It's similar to what we saw with like a Luther Burden. It's what we've seen with like a Jackson Smith and Jigba. We've seen this in the past with players where their junior season, they have unbelievable, because breakout score is what drives the production stuff within the model, and breakout score is a schedule and age adjusted yards per team pass attempt metric that I created. And as a player scales up in yards per team pass attempt, if he's doing that, especially at a really reasonable age, he's going to look better in breakout score. So hypothetically, like a senior could have a really good season, and if that's the one season where like he could still have an okay enough breakout score because it was that big of a season. Now, fortunately, it didn't like Xavier Legette that much, even though that happened with him. So like it's not weighing that too much. But his age adjusted production because of that season, and because the whole body of work still isn't bad even outside of that season. But it just looks really, really good in the spreadsheets right now. But like I said, I'm in the very, very beginning stages. I'm trying to finish up the year 2 models or year 2 profiles for the prospect guide. But I would be shocked if Jordan Tyson is not the model's wide receiver 1. I know that injury history and such is one of the big question marks with him. So we're going to have to take that with a grain of salt, but the model really, really likes Tyson.
The film backs it up, man. He's a really good prospect.
Yeah, it's good to know. And then the other one at running back, Jeremiyah Love, he's getting a lot of love, if you will, as the obvious top back in this class. Do you see that? And then like, how do you see him stacking up against other elite backs that we've seen recently? And then are there any other backs that you really like from this class that you've looked at?
Yeah, so he's Jeremiyah Love, running back out of Notre Dame. He's 6 foot, 214 pounds, so brings a ton of size to the position. It doesn't necessarily play the way that you would think a 6 foot, 214 pound running back would play. Like you would think that is just an absolute hammer coming downhill. He certainly can lower his shoulders and drive through contact and has that ability. But his best skill set, he's one of the best receiving backs that I've scouted. Like his ability as a receiver and just his natural receiving ability is absolutely insane. Like I actually think there's a world if we could go back to when he first came into college, where if a coach had told him, I actually want you to go and be a wide receiver, that he could have been an absolutely spectacular and phenomenal one. He's a good running back. Don't get me wrong. I do not think that he should be in the conversation of being billed as this next elite running back. He's the clear running back 1 in this class because this class is not great outside of him. But when I'm doing these exercises, I want to kind of put it, and I'm happy that you phrased it this way. Like I had actually done the exercise of, if I want to look back over the last 3 years to kind of put it into context for people, like where would he go in conjunction with these other running backs? Like over the past few draft classes we've had Ashton Genty, and this is as a prospect, right? This is not knowing what we know now. So Ashton Genty in the 2025 class, Marion Hampton, Travion Henderson. Then in 2024, you go back to Jonathan Brooks. Feels like an absolute lifetime ago that he came out of college. Then Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, and Zach Charbonnet in 2023. So if I were to go through and rank Jeremiyah Love as a prospect within those players, Bijan Robinson's the clear number one for me. Ashton Genty would have been right behind him. Then I'd go with Jahmyr Gibbs as a prospect, Marion Hampton, and then I would put Jeremiyah Love above Travion Henderson, Zach Charbonnet, and Jonathan Brooks. Yeah. So if that kind of makes sense to put him into, I don't think that he's a slam dunk 101 selection. He's ranked lower for me than Carnell Tate, Jordan Tyson, and Makai Lemon and Casey Concepcion right now from a film standpoint. I know that will not be industry consensus, but that's kind of the way that I see them right now. So Love's a good running back. He's a good prospect, but there's a potential that he's miscast based on the type of skill set that he has versus the body type that he has.
Yeah. So while you were saying that, I was obviously listening, but I was pulling up the model on a separate screen because I was curious where so right now I have him assumed at like top 10, like 10-ish overall pick draft capital. That's just based on NFL mock draft database. But if I look back the last 3 years, the players with higher scores than him, Jahmyr Gibbs, Ashton Genty, Bijan Robinson, Amarian Hampton, those four guys, all look better than him. And then, right below, like he's in the elite producer category, still looks good, but a guy like Bijan, Jahmyr Gibbs, and Ashton Genty were legendary performer category. And he's, he's just seemingly not quite there. It doesn't mean that he's bad, but I have seen sort of like that, stance that he is that good. I can't wait to watch more of him and see what he's all about, but that's where things are at for me right now. All right. Last question before I let you go. I always ask for a hot take in season when I do perspectives, but we're now out of the season. So give me a hot take for this NFL offseason. It could be draft related. It could be free agency related. It could be even 2026 related, like season wide, whatever you want. Just give me a hot take.
I can't wait for this to blow up in my face. Let's go. Tyler Algier will be a weekly starter in fantasy football in 2026.
Oh, I like that. I
think him going into free agency, I think he's going to be one of the players that gets a little bit more money than we were expecting. We saw obviously really good things from him early on in his career. Then you get Bijan coming in into town, and he obviously takes a back seat, but he fills a very, very valuable role for an NFL offense. And I think for him to land in, I mentioned it earlier on in the show, but like Denver to be the Thunder to RG Harvey's Lightning there, or even Chicago if they wanted to upgrade over Kyle Monangai, which I don't think he was good, but don't get me wrong, but his draft capital I think won't prohibit them from taking a look at someone like Algier to be alongside DeAndre Swift this next year. Like there's a ton of situations where I could see Algier landing in where he could be the RB1 in that backfield pretty quickly. So he's someone that is a buy for me right now in Dynasty because I don't think the majority of people even know that he's actually hitting free agency.
Yeah, and if it's a weaker draft class, then teams are going to know that going in, and go after that running back. Man, this was great. It was great to catch up with you. It was great to hear your fantasy takes again. Let everyone know what you're working on, where they can find you, all that good stuff.
Yeah, for sure. So like I said at the beginning, like I'm doing this for the love of the game. This is not because I'm trying to support my family or anything like that. So all my content's free. And it's really just kind of as I have the ability to do it. So YouTube channel is Kyle Yates Dynasty Fantasy Football. So make sure to go and look that up. And then over on Twitter at Kyle Y NFL. And I've got a free Substack as well, Kyle Y NFL. You're going to find me on any social media platform. Just search Kyle Y NFL and I'll come up there.
Yeah. And I also want to shout out, you document a lot of the stuff that you're doing with your daughter, and it's great to see. It's from one dad to another. I just love seeing the dad content out there, and you really playing the role well, for her. So it's really, really awesome to see that content as well.
I appreciate that, man.
Yeah, of course. You can find all my stuff over on lateround.com. Make sure you're following me on social, Twitter, Bluesky at LateRoundQB. Hope you guys like another Perspectives episode. This is the first Perspectives episode since the end of the season. So we'll be doing these every other week, on Fridays. I don't even know who the next guest is. Actually, I do know who the next guest is. But we'll see what happens this offseason with the Perspectives show. But every other Friday, you'll get Perspectives. And then in between that, you will get the mailbag episode. But otherwise, everyone, as usual, thanks for tuning in.